and welcome to this week's episode of Haunted Historians. With me are two very haunted men following the American elections. We have superior human beings, Rodney Smith and
Ooh.
Declan Doyle. And my name's Sean Murray. How are you doing, gents? Given that the main Googling search on the day before the election was, is Biden running for president? Is there a case to be made that maybe Americans shouldn't be allowed to vote in American elections? What do you think?
Well, I suppose they say in democracy we get the leaders we deserve. So that's the great thing about democracy. It's we'll wait and see, and maybe we'll be surprised with some of the high level nominations so far. Um, I, I think the standard of people coming in um, may be questionable, and
Yeah,
but again,
I'm expect
maybe they'll surprise us.
I'm expecting a call any day now.
Yeah. Oh, don't
Bit of a
worry. That call is
lottery,
coming, Sean. Not the one you're
Could be
looking for,
any,
but that
could be
call is
any of us.
coming. Yes.
How
It,
about
it,
you,
wa-
Deck? Initial
it wasn't
thoughts?
re- it wasn't really an election. It was more of a census of the manipulated.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
I put this solely at the foot of the internet, yeah, and what it's done to society in general. People only get little sound bites. That's all they want. They don't give a shit whether it's true or not. You know, and this is pervaded all the way along. That's if he's getting away with this. People are making up their own versions of him as they see fit. You know, I don't mind if he's only talking shit over there. Be serious about this. I like that part. We'll ignore all the rest. And people, that's why he's so popular. Everyone has their own version of him, and he's
yeah,
fucking,
yeah.
you know,
People seem to be distilling what he says
yeah,
into
reality.
this is what he means, but no,
Yeah,
he just batshit like at the end of the
yeah,
day.
completely.
But anyway,
Like
the
fucking.
boys.
If you look at it's pretty, just even a few week or two just before, he did a 40-minute dancing session instead of a town hall. Just what the fuck to YMCA again? Who's he appealing to there?
Anyway, fortunately, this is a non-political
Oh, it
podcast,
is.
so we don't talk about
Yeah.
those things anyway.
And the
Thankfully.
politics is weirder than
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, I'd say
that.
Hitler must be spinning in his grave with all the comparisons. I think it's kind of it's a modern way of getting back at Hitler by comparing him to Donald Trump on a regular basis. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he's getting what he deserves. Both of them are. So anyway, we'll move on. Rods, you're going to go forward for us this week.
First,
What have we got
yes,
for?
we're going to go back on a somber topic, and you mentioned Hitler, so this refers to post-World War II and events happening. So we're going to talk about the Berlin Wall today, and this will be part one, and we'll do part two at a later stage. But how could you build a wall between two countries? How did it happen? And what were the incidents that led to it? So we're going back to the end of the Second World War. Germany has been defeated. Russia has invaded from the east after initially having an agreement with Germany that there'd be a non-aggression pact between the two. Then Hitler broke his word and invaded Russia. So Russia was going to ensure that Germany would never be in a position to invade Russia again. So Russia invaded, took over a lot of Eastern Europe, and at the end of the war, the Allies in Russia agreed that they would split Germany amongst them. So France, the UK, and the US took the West, and Russia had the East. But the agreement also was Berlin was the capital city, so the four nations agreed that they would share Berlin as well. So you had the east side and you had the west side. And the west was controlled by the Americans, the British, and the French. And the Russians then controlled the east side. Now, at the time, then, the Allies were looking to put a bill together to use the Marshall Plan from America to help reconstruct Germany and build it back up again. But the Soviets weren't interested in that. They were actually busy stripping East Germany of any infrastructure, any facilities that it had, and bringing it back to the Soviet Union. So you had a case then where, as the years went on, there was a breakdown in trust between the Allies and Russia, and you really had an East versus West. The people in the West seemed to be better off than people in the East, and you had people going across the border all the time. So you had people going from East Berlin over to West Berlin, either for their jobs or to see their family. And what happened then, around 1948, Stalin was getting a bit tired of this, so they started to blockade goods and supplies coming into West Berlin. Now, the whole city of Berlin was within the eastern part of Germany that was controlled by the Soviets. So the Americans, the British, and the French would have had to go through Russian-controlled Germany to get to West Berlin. So all the roads were closed off, so nothing was allowed in. And then you had your famous the Berlin airlift, where food, supplies, fuel was actually flown in by plane into West Berlin, and that actually kept that part of the city going. And eventually, then Stalin stepped back and said, "Okay, let's open the roads again and let people deliver stuff in." But you started to have a consistent flowing of people from the east to the west, and over the 1940s and 1950s. And even though people could be punished for leaving the east and not coming back, they still would do it. So by 1961, you had the guts of 3 million people or so who were actually left East Germany to go to West Germany. These were all professional people, lawyers, architects, teachers, doctors, highly educated, and builders, architects. So there was a huge brain drain at the time. So I think we need to do something to stop this. We can't go on as a state. They'd lost about 20% of their population. So they got together, and in 1961, a young president, John F. Kennedy at the time, said, unfortunately, at the time in the interview, that he wouldn't have any major concerns if some kind of structure or barrier was built between West Berlin and East Berlin. So the communists on the side of East Berlin and the Soviets jumped on that and they said, listen, we think we can get away with actually building something here. The Americans won't object. So what they decided to do on a day in August, the 13th of August, on this midday on Sunday, when they knew people would be going off for the weekend, or a lot of them would be going to the beaches, they started to tear up the streets between West Berlin and East Berlin so that cars couldn't travel down. And then they started to put up barbed wire and blocks of concrete. So within a few days, you actually had the case of where you could once walk from west to east. You actually had then, there were no streets, you had barbed wire, any apartments or houses near the border were destroyed as well. So nobody could actually sneak in through these apartments or jump out of an apartment building and hop over the border. And as the years went on, they actually started building a series of walls. So they had the first series of walls in 61. And then over the next 10, 15 years, they improved it. They added additional walls. They had lots and lots of soldiers manning the border, and they were told to shoot anyone in sight who tried to escape. So what happened then was you had a breakdown, and you had families who were separated, who wouldn't see one another. And you then had a period then within East Germany, some will say a period of stability eventually, because people settled down and realized that we're not going to be able to escape. We're not going to get across the border, so we have to like it or lump it and get on with it. But over the years, then there were many different attempts at escapes, some successful and some not successful. The other famous piece was they had a no man's land at the wall as well. So this would be a large strip of land that you'd be able to see if somebody was coming to try and escape over this Berlin Wall. And there are some famous stories then of escapes, but what I'm going to do now, we will leave that until part 2. This was just the background to the construction of the wall, why it was there, why it happened. In part 2, in our next episode, I'll tell you all about some of the escapes and ultimately eventually how the Berlin Wall came tumbling down in 1989 and Germany was unified in 1990. So that's me for this week, chaps.
Fantastic, Rod. Thank you very much.
No bothers.
God, it kind of brings about probably, I suppose, the obvious question. Like, if they had known that building that wall would give rise to the Winds of Change by Scorpion, the song, maybe they would have thought twice back in the 60s, you know?
Yes, well, even David Hasselhoff is part of the story as well, but more about that in part 2, believe it or not. David
Okay, yeah. It's your story is not history without the Hoff, you know?
He was the chisel. He was the chisel that started. He took the first chip.
Fantastic. Thanks, Roz. Looking forward to the next bit. Okay, well, we go on. I'll zip in now. We'll keep it moving. And I'm going to bring you back to 1908. At the Dublin Horse Show. There's a 17-year-old schoolgirl, convent schoolgirl called Bridget Dowling. She's there with her friends, and she comes across a handsome stranger. And he's an older man, and he's charming, and he tells Bridget he's a wealthy hotelier, and he's doing a European tour of hotels to see which he will buy. And they start dating, and they have regular dates at the National Museum. And yeah, it starts to get serious. But Bridget's parents aren't overly fond of this older man, this chap. And especially not as everyone finds out, he's not actually a wealthy hotelier. He is a waiter at the Shelbourne Hotel. And his name is Alois Hitler. And he is actually Hitler's older brother. And such was Bridget's family's resistance to this chap, they eloped. They took a ferry across to Liverpool. And in 1911, they gave birth to a son, William Patrick Hitler, who commonly known through his mom as Paddy. So uh, the marriage didn't last too long. They did go across to Germany and visit actual Adolf Hitler, or Austria as it was at the time, before he came to Germany. And there is stories of Hitler coming over, as Adolf Hitler coming over and visiting them in Liverpool. He went off, and Alois went off, left. Apparently, he was quite an abusive man, but he went off and remarried without ever actually ending the marriage to Bridget. But anyway, as Hitler became a more prominent figure in Germany and became chancellor, Bridget and Paddy moved over to Germany, and Hitler got Paddy a job in a bank, in one of the big banks in Germany. And Paddy was a bit of a blackguard, and he started kind of throwing about the Hitler name. He was quite a charmer as well. Became a bigwig in society as Hitler became chancellor. He actually copied Hitler's moustache and some of his mannerisms, including the folding of the arm, and started giving out disjointed pro-Nazi lectures and that. But he became quite a popular figure around Germany, around Berlin, as the highfalutin class in Berlin, just because of his name. And he went to Hitler was not overly fond of him at all, and eventually Hitler just thought he was an upstart, and he was incredibly annoying by doing all this. So eventually, Paddy went on to actually try to blackmail Hitler by threatening to expose Hitler's Jewish ancestry. Um, and and so he got, like, his ultimate aim was to have a place in Hitler's administration, in his cabinet. He wanted a bit of power for himself. So Hitler, whether sneakily or not, Hitler wanted him to become a German citizen, and Paddy became a little bit suspicious, because Hitler, it was well known Hitler didn't like him. So Paddy felt it was a trap. So he scarpered back to the UK, him and Bridget. Uh, but when he got back to the UK, he started writing subtle little anti-Hitler messages, and he had an article in Look magazine, "Why I Hate My Uncle," was the name of the article. And so yeah, they became kind of celebrities for a short time, until the actual war itself and the proper extent of Hitler's um, tyranny kind of became more widespread. So they scarpered again. They went to the States, to Long Island in the States, and here again, Paddy started giving tours and lectures on Hitler, coming up with all sorts of claims. He was a sex pervert, and I think his lecture was titled "What the German People Think." So making out to be speaking on behalf of the German people, your German common man. Um, and he did this quite successfully, again, making a few bob off it. That died down again. Again, the United States, as they became kind of more aware, okay, Hitler's not, yeah, it's probably not cool to be going around proclaiming yourself as the nephew of Hitler. So he went to join the Canadian Army. That didn't work out. Paddy then joined the US Navy as a pharmacist, and he was injured in action. He got shrapnel in his leg and was awarded the Purple Heart um, in the US Army in 1944 as part of the war effort against Hitler. So that was kind of him. When the war ended, again, like when it became very apparent about the Jewish element and all the absolute horrific nature of the Nazis, they decided, him and Bridget decided, right, we're going to change the names. So they went initially to Hiller, Hiller, and then eventually to Stuart Houston. Um, and so Paddy Stewart Houston and Bridget Stewart Houston kind of went into kind of normal society. He worked as a lab analyst. And he eventually met a German woman, Phyllis, and they had four kids. One of them died quite young. Three of them are still living. They are Alex, Brian, and I have a rubber written down here. Anyway, Alexander, Brian, and Louis, um, Stuart Houston, are still living. Paddy himself died in 1987, and he's buried with Bridget in Long Island. The three boys, the eldest, Alexander, his middle name given to him by his dad is Adolf, which is a bit of a piss take. Given that he wanted to wash his hands of the whole Hitler Nazi kind of thing, so you'd have to say there was undertones there. They never really let it go. And according to neighbours, the three lads made a pact to never have kids. So as to one of them now in their 60s, one of them in their 50s, and one is in their 40s. But they're still happily, and apparently they're a recent interview with Alexander, and he was anti-Trump, ironically, after all that, but with all the comparisons we said earlier on. But yeah, so it's not known whether they procreated or anything like that. And there you go, the story of Paddy Hitler, a bit of a messer and an asshole as well. But yeah, we can kind of claim him.
That's fascinating. Yeah, the Irish connection as well. The legend has it that Hitler visits his brother over in Ireland when she was living here, when his brother was married here, and he saw there used to be the swastika laundry in Dublin, based out of Dublin, the south of Dublin. And Hitler came across a swastika on the laundry van, these laundry vans that would drive around Dublin, and they were still in being, they were still active until the 1980s. But the rumor has it that that's where he first saw the swastika, and he thought, oh, that'd be a good idea actually to use for the Nazi party, and he took it on board. But that's a by the by.
That's gas. We claim everything, don't we?
We do.
The swastika. My
Everything is
God.
us.
So yeah, we'll wrap up there on Hitler. Let's hope Donald Trump's sons make a similar pact. We live in hope. Uh, okay, and with that we'll move on to Decky. What have you got, Deck?
That's amazing. It really is. Now, where do you go after that? Now, this gets a little bit sad in parts, would you believe? Now, we're going back to July 1861. Essentially the area in the Curragh in Kildare. It had become an army training ground for the British Army got over to Crimea. It was constantly being used. So anyway, in 1861, the young Prince of Wales, who was later to be Edward VII, began a 10-week stay in the Curragh. He was sent over here because his parents, Albert and Victoria, thought he was a bit of a wild boy and needed some discipline, you know. So over to Curragh he was sent for a 10-week stint. Now, during his time here, his peers would have had a different opinion to his parents, and they considered his sacred virginity something to be dismissed of immediately, you know. So they began toying with him, and within a short while, they convinced him to go with it. Now, this is where it gets awful. I initially seen this word and I thought it was fantastic. It's the Curra Wren. I thought it was a small bird, indicative of the area. You know, it's not. There were women. This was post-famine Ireland, so these women were orphans or younger orphans. Or they were dispossessed of land, but these were like free roaming women. They were generally aged between 17 and 25, and they lived in nests in the gorse all around the Curragh. Now, there was lots of them, you know, and in the summer months, more would come, and they were there servicing the British Army. They were shunned by the locals because of the nature of what they were doing, and they're just lost in the middle of this society. And this is what they were doing just to stay alive. Their nests were about 9 feet by 6 feet. Had a little bit of a roof over them, but it was essentially just the bracken and the gorse around the area. Hence the name they were given, which is the Wrens. So the Prince of Wales compadres in the army convinced him to get a wren one of the evenings. So one of the more popular ones was a lady known as Nellie Clifton. Now, Nellie Clifton is a bit of a strange past. No one's really certain where she came from. There's records of her name popping up in Dungarvan. There's a few other areas where her name is also prevalent. So they're not 100% certain where she actually came from. But she ended up in the Curragh and became one of the Curragh Wrens. She spent 3 nights with the Prince of Wales. It's all recorded in his diaries. It was then put about that this is what he was doing. His father had many people in the army camp, as you'd imagine. So word got back to him what his son has been doing. So the parents weren't amused at all that not only had he lost his virginity, but he'd lost it to a fallen woman in Ireland, which they didn't even consider human, you know. So he had to be taken out of here. So he was whipped out before it got too messy for fear that he'd made the woman pregnant. Now, so he was brought off to Germany then where he met Princess Alexandra of Denmark. He only came back once after that. But he didn't go searching for the woman. Nothing was heard of her since then. So yeah, Curragh Wrens.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's mad. That's a sad tale. I've never heard of anything like that.
No.
Yeah. I have any idea how many there were or
There was it started off in the region, you're looking at a base region of about 90, and then the summer months started to increase.
well, okay.
You know? So
And
yeah.
just basically there for the British.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Feral sex lives.
Yeah, that's sad.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't it?
God. Wow.
And do we know what would happen to them what would happen to them?
No one cared.
No
record of them.
No record. Wow.
They were shown by society. Church records would have been the thing back then, which never had nothing to do with them. You know, so these completely lost people.
Well,
you know,
terrific.
Yeah, it's awful. I say when I seen the word originally, I thought it was a small bird that was just native to the Curragh area, as you would do with the word wren, you know.
Yeah.
But then when I read just a little bit further, it's just awful.
Wow.
There you go.
God, that's heavy.
There you go,
That's heavy. Well, thanks a million, Deck.
Well,
okay, God.
at the same time, took Edward VII's virginity for him.
Yeah.
You know,
what can you say?
Well,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, Sean, what can you say? Yeah, it's kind of What can you? It's
Yeah. Well, thanks for finishing things on a downer, Deck. That's amazing.
Goodness.
It wasn't my intention, but yeah, I know.
Yeah,
You're
for next time, Deck.
Gosh.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. That's mad. I did not know anything about that. That's harrowing in its own way. God, the old times. It's mad what we think what we have to worry about these days.
Yeah. It's only a few generations ago too.
Yeah, the broadband going down. Yeah, it's Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's fantastic, lads. Listen, we'll probably wrap it up there.
Yeah.
I'm going to dedicate this show to our third listener, my
Yeah.
nephew Stephen Murray, who
Welcome,
is
Stephen. Welcome on board. Yes.
that's it.
Woo,
It
great.
was in foreign climes, but has been tuning in. So thanks to me and Stephen, and has
Good
we've
man.
had some constructive criticism, um, as opposed to just normal criticism that we get. So that was brilliant, lads. Really enjoyed that. And yeah, looking forward to the next one. So take care, guys, and
Okay. Stay well, all. Take care.
yeah, absolutely. Bye bye.